Hey everyone, what's up? Can you all hear me and see me? So first of all, is the background music too loud? This is uh, one of the first few times that I've streamed, so I want to make sure that my voice is coming up over the background music. Yeah? Okay. Great. So I want to apologize first of all because I don't have a second screen. So as I'm going to be reviewing these notes, I might not see your comments. I might not see any like super chats or any memberships or anything like that. So I apologize if I miss your message, but I think I will be taking a break and then going through the comments, and we'll do it like that. All right. Thanks, Flo, for mentioning that. I'll just bump it down a notch. Okay. So first of all, last night I went through the platform's State of the Union broadcast, and if you don't know what this is, let's talk about that. So, WWDC is the big event that everyone knows about because they're announcing features of the OSs that everyone would be excited about. It's more for the general public, and they keep sort of the developer stuff low key. There were some cool announcements, but they didn't really dive very deep into it. So there is another keynote or broadcast, if you will, called the platform's State of the Union. So this is where it's more developer oriented, and they talk about, as a developer, how you can start implementing some of the cool features that they're going to release in the next OS that they talked about in WWDC. So you can watch that either on the Apple website or this developer app. If you have a Mac, this app is really cool because not only can you download the sessions to watch and any broadcasts to watch offline, but you can also bookmark. So you can see here, I bookmarked a ton of WWDC sessions. All of these things seem so interesting. There's actually a lot more sessions than these, and I highly recommend here. If you just take a look, right, there's a ton of stuff, and all of this is happening like it's available right now, all of these for Tuesday at least. So you can see, oh, some of them are only 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I sort of assumed that they would all be an hour, but I mean, if they're only 20 minutes to 10 minutes, I might be able to get through these. But I basically went through this whole list and bookmarked the ones I was interested in. The cool thing also is that you can look at these sessions for the previous years as well. And I think they have sessions going back all the way to 2017, if I believe, maybe even later. So you can always learn different APIs as they become relevant to what you're working on. And who better to get it from, aside from, directly from the Apple engineers. I will say that some of the information is outdated if you are looking at really old WWDC sessions. So today I'll be going through my notes for the platform State of the Union, and I'll also probably bring up relevant screenshots. I'm probably not going to play any audio from this because I don't want this video to get copyright striked or something like that. So I will pull up relevant slides as I go through these notes. But as you can see, there's tons of cool stuff that was announced in this broadcast. It was about an hour and 15 minutes. So if you do have the time, you can hop in and watch it. But I only have an hour, unfortunately. I have to run after that, but I will try to get through this. I won't go through every single line. I'll summarize it for you. Okay, so let's get started. Let me just quickly check the chat. And this is my first time using this streaming software. I don't know if you see like chat messages coming up here on the screen on the right hand side. Do you guys see any? Because this is supposed to be a chat box, but I didn't really know how to hook it up to the live, the chat. Yeah, are there messages? Oh, cool. That's really cool. So I guess in the replay when I watch this, we'll see all the messages come up here. That's really, really cool. And actually, I was so confused about streaming, and it seemed like there was all this setup and things to do, but actually now just looking into this, it's pretty straightforward, and I had a lot of fun yesterday. I didn't do any voice. We were just watching WWDC, and we're just interacting through chat. I had such a blast with you guys, and if some of you were there yesterday, thank you for supporting. I'm going to be trying to stream every day this week. I have a schedule at cwc.to/livestream. And I'm thinking of what I'm going to do after I do this review is I'm going to edit the recording, sort of slice out all these parts where I'm not actually talking about the platform State of the Union, and I'll do like a sort of condensed video that people can watch. But now that you guys are here live, we get to interact.
Effortless. So confirm our...
Sorry about that. That was kind of loud. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing that they announced in this presentation was Xcode Cloud. Now this is a really big thing for them, but I think for developers, at least developers who've worked in companies and worked in teams, they've always had a solution for doing this. And let me just bring up a relevant slide to sort of show what this is. So they sort of talk about this software development process as, you know, you're coding it and then you're writing unit tests, or, you know, essentially automated ways to test your code. Because imagine if you're making changes, and you had a huge app, it'd really be hard to manually test every single function and feature and use case. So what happens with larger projects is people write automated tests that can perform things like click here, check this, assert that this is true when after this happens, double check that people can create accounts. So you have all these tests that you can automatically run every time you make a code change. So that's what this one's about. Integrating is about sort of the team collaboration process when you do coding. So I think for a lot of us, when we're coding solo, we know exactly where things are and where the functions are, where the classes are and everything. But in a bigger environment, it has to be a lot more organized, because people can't just dump code into the project. It's going to get out of hand really quickly. So this is really talking about that review process where there are certain people who are in charge of reviewing other people's code before they allow it into the code base. And there's a process called pull request when working with source control that happens. So we'll get to that in a quick second. And then deliver is, after you create a build that you want to send out to your testers, to your QA team or whatnot. This is a step that automates that, so you don't have to manually do it. And then refine is the step of collecting user feedback, collecting feedback from QA testers and all of that, so that you can then make those changes into the code. So that's sort of the cycle. And if you've seen in the past, I talk about, and even in the descriptions of all of my YouTube videos, I often talk about a tool called Bitrise. So that's what this tool does. It connects to your GitHub account or other repos, whatever you're using, and every time you commit a code change in there, it pulls the code, it does the building and runs any test cases, and that workflow is very customizable. So you can put in any scripts and steps here. So I haven't talked with them yet since they announced Xcode Cloud, but essentially that's sort of what Xcode Cloud is trying to replace. Now, the difference, I think, is that Bitrise works for multiple platforms. So a lot of companies, when they build an app, they have like an Android version, they have maybe a web platform, an iOS version, and whatnot. So tools like Bitrise and other CI and CD tools, they work for multiple platforms. Whereas Xcode Cloud, I think they're just targeting iOS. But when I looked at their demo, the really cool thing was that it works so well inside Xcode and with iOS, and it looks so easy to use, at least from a demo perspective from what they showed. So I sort of predict that if you're only working with iOS, you might just end up using this. And this is not, I'll just say this up front, they're not intending this to be a free service. I don't know how much it'll cost, but at the end of the presentation for the Xcode Cloud section, they mentioned that fees will be announced in the fall. As a solo developer, this might not be relevant, or you might not want to use it. But I think if you have the intention to go into the industry, it is a good thing to know, because all the companies, any larger projects, they all have processes like this. The other thing that I see is that these companies like Bitrise, they do this for a living, right? This is their bread and butter. So I kind of think that they probably have the more mature product. However, Apple has a lot of money and they're a really large company. So over time, over the years, I feel like they might take over the iOS space. But if you were a company who had products on multiple platforms, I don't think you would use Xcode Cloud and another tool. Okay, cool. So that's what this is in a summary. Let me see if there's any interesting points I can point out rather than go through line by line. So this part I thought was really cool, because so traditionally you can, you're coding your app in Xcode and then you hit Command B or Command R and you run your app and you build it. Now some large apps, especially when you have a lot of like CocoaPods and third-party libraries like Firebase, they can take quite a long time to build. And even my simple demos that have just a Firebase pod could take up to like 4 minutes to build, and I find myself just drumming my fingers as I'm waiting for it to build, because I'm recording, right? And then I have to ask my editor to cut out those 4 minutes. Now, this is kind of cool because they showed this slide where you build it in the cloud, so you can continue doing what you're doing, and it just compiles not on your machine, so it doesn't take up your resources, but it does it on their servers. Yeah, so these are the 4 steps that they talked about, how this build step works. So first of all, you have to select the product, and the product is if you have an Xcode project, it's basically the output, like the app. And you confirm the workflow, so you can have custom workflows that do different things. I think the default workflow is just build it whenever you commit a new change. And then you grant access to the source code repo where you're hosting your code. And then, let's see where we are here. Yeah, securely connect to the hosted repo. And the cool thing as well, in addition to just building the project on the cloud, is that it will register your app in App Store Connect. And then, because typically, if you're used to, like if you've submitted apps before, you'll know that you have to jump from place to place. App Store Connect is this portal where you sort of manage your App Store metadata and where you send your builds to send out to testers via test flight and things like that. So this will automatically send it there as well, and it'll help you register your app in App Store Connect. So that used to be a process where you'd have to get out of Xcode and go on the browser and do it yourself. Their mantra with Xcode Cloud was to bring in as many of those processes into Xcode, so you don't have to leave Xcode. It sort of sounds evil, but I think it does make things a lot easier. Going here, this was really cool. So the testing now. So here's it showing like it's sending the build, and then you have a screen that you can visit later and see how those builds completed. Did they fail? Did they like build properly? Okay, and then he's talking about testing. So testing with your app, if you haven't done it on a larger scale, you might just launch it on your app, and then you might just scroll through it and test it a little bit, and then ask if your brother or sister has a device, or your mom can you borrow their iPad and launch it on that and test it by hand. But you can imagine with a larger app that you're trying to reach a huge audience, that sort of testing just isn't going to scale properly. So with Xcode Cloud, one cool thing is that you can run your test plan, which is essentially just the basket of test cases or unit tests that we talked about earlier. You can run multiple test plans on multiple devices, simulators, multiple platforms, and multiple OSs all simultaneously. So you just select, what device you want to test it on, what platform, what OS, and you can even run it on the beta OSs as well without having to download it on your own device and install the beta on your own device to test it. So that's really cool. And then what you get are all these results, and it takes screenshots along the way so you can sort of see if anything's wrong visually, and then immediately sort of just know, I guess. All right, so I thought this was really cool because it's really a large scale way for you to test your app on multiple devices and platforms and screen sizes and the whole thing. And integrate, so this thing used to be, it depends on which source code repo you use, but for example, let me just quickly show you. So for example, we have maybe this one right here. Yeah, because I think there's another branch. Is there? No. I thought that one had another branch. This one definitely has another branch. Okay, cool. So typically what you would do is you would branch off, like if you're trying to do a new feature, right? You wouldn't, you would create a branch of your main branch. So essentially a copy. You would work on your feature, and then when you're ready to integrate it back into sort of the main code base or the main branch, you would do what's called a pull request. So you go new pull request and you choose the branch that you're working on. Maybe you're working on this one, pagination, and you're like, okay, it's ready to go. So I'm going to make a request to integrate this into the main code base. And then you create your pull request. It shows you sort of exactly what's changed. And then, there's that person that's supposed to review your code and make sure that it's up to snuff before allowing it into the main branch. This process used to sort of take place where you were hosting your code. So here, on GitHub, you could make comments and stuff like that. I'm not going to actually create this pull request, but then the person reviewing your code can make comments here, and you can have a dialogue here, and then you can make changes and all that. So they've pulled this process into Xcode. So that's what they show here. Yeah, so you can see a list of the pull requests here. You can actually comment, and you can review changes and all that. So that's really cool. Definitely saves a lot of time. And then delivery, no more need to manage your certificates and profiles and keep them up to date on your Mac. This is huge because before there used to be a provisioning portal where you would register your machine and create provisioning profiles for your apps. And all this does is it's basically for security, for code signing. So make sure that no unauthorized parties, submit your app pretending to be you, or, make changes pretending to be you because you've securely code signed that bundle. So this used to be, in the early days, quite a involved process, but apparently with Xcode Cloud, there's no more need to manage all of that. So that's great. We're going to do comments. I'm going to check comments right after I talk about Refine. So Refine, basically the process is you upload your app to App Store Connect, where you can then send it off to beta testers through TestFlight, and then they get a notification or they get an email to download your test app on their device so they can test it. And then they can, if they experience a crash or a bug, they can send you feedback directly from that TestFlight app, and then that sort of goes into your App Store Connect and your TestFlight. So they've just brought that into Xcode, so you don't even have to jump anywhere else. So yeah, this is just showing another person trying out someone's app through TestFlight, and TestFlight now is available on the Mac. I didn't even know it wasn't before, but you can send some feedback. So you can see here that they're going to send this feedback to the developer, and the developer now inside Xcode can see that TestFlight feedback. And the really cool thing that they showed here was that it carries the stack trace with them for that crash or that bug. So typically when an app crashes, if someone tells you, oh, I did this and this and this, and the app crashed, you have to be able to reproduce that on your end. Otherwise, it's really hard to solve because you have no idea what happened. If you can't reliably reproduce that issue, yeah, it's tough. So what they're saying here is that when you tap on this feedback, it brings that crash report with the trace from that person's machine, and tells you all the details about that user, that machine, what OS they were using, what device they were using, all that information. And you can see here that there's sort of a log of what that person was doing, what methods were being called to the point where it crashes, and then you can go and investigate it. Apparently, they showed this demo where you double click that crash and it zooms exactly to the line of code where that happened. So, in theory, that sounds really cool. Okay, so let's pause for comments. That was sort of the big announcement. Okay, actually, there's two more announcements to talk about with Xcode Cloud. So they talk about it's super secure and everything. It's private. No one sees your code. And then also there's a free limited beta. So actually this I should mention. If you have an Apple developer account, you can go and sign up for the Xcode Cloud beta, and they'll let you use it for free during this beta period. However, when you sign up for the beta, you join a wait list. So I've done this already. I recommend that you do it anyways, even if you don't think you'll use it, who knows? But they're only allowing a limited number of people to try it out right now. And then pricing and availability in the fall. And because I imagine it's a new service, they have to have tons of servers to host this sort of stuff and to run code. So they really need to make sure it's smooth before releasing it to the masses. Okay, so let's take a break and look at comments before we talk about the Swift stuff. I am going to get a second monitor so I can actually keep an eye on the chat on the left-hand side. But right now, hey Zach, yeah, that's right. Yeah, TestFlight for Mac is great because I'm planning to build a CWC app where you can view our content through a Mac app as well. So that's really good. And I think I saw you yesterday, right, Zach? On the WWDC stream. Oh, and Mathinating too. Nice to see you again. Yes, Platform State of the Union is released. You can watch the replay through the developer app, which is what I'm using here. Or you can go to developer.apple.com, and there should be like a big button to view all the WWDC stuff. Let's see, Alessandro, yeah, MVVM architecture, definitely covered in our course. Let's see, Guntapali, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I think that in terms of the versions of OS, you're gonna have to be forced to upgrade as they release new versions of Xcode and things like that. Even if you want to watch WWDC, I think they're just forcing you to like upgrade your browser, upgrade your OS, and so there's only so long you can hang on for before you're forced to upgrade. Yeah, I'm using Streamlabs OBS. Let's see. Oh, great. Awesome. I think I'm caught up. Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone. Let's continue. So Swift concurrency, there's this new pattern async await. And now this is actually really, really huge because we all write asynchronous code, whether we know it or not. I paused because I'm repeating the exact same words as she said. And it's true because when you write an app, it's usually not super self-contained, right? Usually you're downloading an image from the net, you're downloading a feed or something like that. And that happens asynchronously, because imagine if your app just pauses and the user can't use the app while it goes through the network to fetch an image or to fetch a feed or something like that. That would be really frustrating for the user. So this stuff happens asynchronously in the background. And just to dial it back, in case you don't know, so synchronous is the opposite of asynchronous, and synchronous just means sort of imagine sequential events. So it would be exactly like what I just described. Your app will say, okay, I'm going to launch the startup screen, and then I'm gonna go fetch an image, and you can't do anything. I'm not gonna do anything until the data comes back. Okay, the data's come back. I'm displaying the image. Now I can do whatever it is. So as you can imagine, network might be slow, congested. They might not have internet connection, so you might be stuck forever. So anyways, that's synchronous. Asynchronous is it spins off another like background thread, another thread of execution. So like think of it as a little CPU worker that it tells, hey, go and fetch that data while I still man the app and make sure that it's usable. So that little worker is going to go asynchronously, go fetch that data, that feed, that image, whatever it may be, and then it comes back with the data and it tells, I don't know, the boss, the main thread that, hey, here's the data. Okay, then the main thread says, okay, thank you for the data. Now I'm going to do something with it. Now I can display the image. But there was no wait time, right? It was doing something else while that little asynchronous worker went to fetch something asynchronously. Now, the reason this is a big deal is because the code to do this used to be kind of convoluted, and the scenario we just talked about is a very basic scenario too. Swift, like concurrency, can the problem can get much larger, especially if you have apps that sort of need to interact in real time. What would be an example? I don't know, some like a game, right? Like a RTS, like League of Legends or whatever. Like things are happening in real time. So I can imagine that the code for that ends up looking really confusing and really hard to understand. Now, just to show you what that simple scenario would be, I'm just gonna launch Xcode and do a quick demo, because I actually don't really understand how they, like, I understand what they're trying to solve, but I'm gonna show you the sort of the old way of doing this, and then let's take a look at what doing the new way would look like. And I'm just guessing because I don't have any Xcode betas installed or anything like that. Okay, so I'm just gonna create a sample Xcode project. Oh, I can actually feel my computer running a lot slower now that I'm streaming. Wow. There's like a huge lag. I think it's time for me to get a new computer. By the way, this machine, let me just pull this up. I'll show you guys what I'm using here. Oh, sorry, that was Xcode, but okay, hide my serial number, but anyways, you can see that it's mid 2015. I do have a ton of RAM, 32 gigs of RAM, so that's pretty cool, but yeah, mid 2015. So if I'm not streaming, things are fine, things are smooth. I have no complaints, but if I'm trying to demo something here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do first is, let's just assume that you have like a view model or something like that, some other class that you're gonna call to fetch some code. So let's just call this view model. Hey, now it's not bad. Oops, sorry about that. Coding live. Okay, so I'm gonna create a function called get stuff. Okay, so this is gonna pretend to go fetch, fetch in the network. Send request to get some network resource. Now, if you're used to writing functions with return types, you might do something like this. And you know, you want to get, let's say your data is an array of strings or something, and you're used to, you know, using this return value. So, you know, you go fetch the resource and you return that. And then in here, you know, let's just create another function here. Say on launch. I don't know. This is not important, but so what you would do is, I just want to demonstrate the method. So you would call get stuff, and you would sort of expect that it go and fetch the network resource and then return this the data to you like this. But this is sort of assuming that synchronous process, right? Because if this sends a request to the network to grab something, it's not going to be able to return and give this to you right away. And so essentially, it's just going to be waiting. So the way to do this asynchronously is, you know, let's say you wanted to assign the result strings from that method like this, right? You want to go get stuff, you want to get the data back, and then you want to like print it or something like that. You want to do something with it. Do something with the result. Now, the way to do this asynchronously is you need to specify a parameter in this method so that it accepts a function that this method can run after it gets the resources back. And that's what this syntax looks like. Let me show you. So you wouldn't have a return value anymore. It would look like, okay, first of all, you'd have a parameter name. And you've probably seen these different parameters called completion. And you've basically been using this without even realizing it. But you know, you open up a closure, and that completion closure gets run at a certain point when the method is done doing its thing. So now, essentially, you're just defining your own completion closure on your own custom function. So here's what this looks like. So yeah, it looked like this, and this would allow the person calling this method to pass in a function that you can run by calling completion. So you know, and you would just call it like that. And then from here, you know, instead of expecting to get a result back like this, now when you call get stuff, you can see that there's a completion parameter. And if you double tap this, if you double click it, it's going to open up a closure. And here, you know, you would specify this. However, with the closure that we've specified, we haven't passed back the data. So in fact, we're not getting the data back here. So for you to specify that data that comes back through that completion, you would just add a parameter like that. And then in here, you could pass that data. So I don't really have any data. So let's say like data 1, data 2. This is just some hard-coded data that I'm passing back to this. Well, essentially I'm calling this. So in here, you would have, let's say, data in, and then you would print the data. So that this data gets into here, and then you're doing something with that here. So as you can see, what happens, this happens asynchronously, right? You call get stuff, and then it, sorry, I was just checking the time. But you call get stuff, and then it calls this method, it sends off the request to do something, and you're also passing through, this is the code that you want to run after the stuff has been retrieved. And so it's going to retrieve the stuff and then call that function that got passed in. So that's how it used to work. And I think once you get used to it, it's not that hard to understand. But then for someone who's just starting with Swift, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So the way that they said this works now is, let me see if I can show you that example. Yeah, so they show an even crazier example, but you can see it's sort of what we did, right? Completion, and then they have this method that you're supposed to pass in, and then they sort of show you what it would look like. You know, they show this animation where it's transforming into just this. Now, I haven't really looked at the code, so I don't know what it would change to, but maybe we'll do a demo when after I play around with this, if I can get the betas and stuff like that. So I think you would essentially, it would look like you wouldn't have this anymore, and it would just be like that. Does that look like what they're doing here? Async, and then you have a return value, and then whenever someone calls it, they would just use the await, right? So I wouldn't even do this anymore. I would just return, yeah, I would just return this array like this. Obviously it's not recognizing this because I don't have any of the beta stuff. But if we go back here, it would be like let result strings equal await, and then you would be able to print. Yeah, so you see how closely this code looks like to the synchronous code that we used to be writing. Like, it's much more natural, right, to read it this way. See, you're essentially marking that this is an asynchronous function. It does something in the background, and then you're just returning the data like normal. And then here, you're just calling the method. You're getting the data back as a return value, and so you're not like, you know, your code isn't jumping around, or at least your understanding of the code, you don't have to be navigating around trying to understand it. This is sort of like top down. You can read the code. So that's what this async await pattern does. A couple of other things for concurrency is structured concurrency. So you could essentially send off multiple asynchronous requests. It's just a way of structuring your asynchronous requests in a way that sort of makes sense to you. So it looks like that, but you put the async up here, and essentially these two lines of code will fire simultaneously, and then you'll be fetching them asynchronously both, I think. And then they have this new data type called actors. So instead of, you know, when you declare a class, like class stage manager, instead you can do, you can change this class to an actor stage manager. And what an actor does is it helps to prevent multiple parties from accessing that thing at once. So this is called mutual exclusive access. And you can imagine concurrency, the nature of it is that, you know, you have things happening simultaneously all over the place. So sometimes there's a resource that cannot be accessed by multiple parties at once. What if two people try to change it like at the same time? You're going to run into these scenarios called race conditions where you didn't expect maybe like party B to access it before party A, but depending on how fast the code is running, depending on all these environmental factors, you know, party A or party B might come first or second. Like, that always changes. And so concurrent code is really hard to debug because you can't count on it being the same every single time you run it. There's so many factors that would affect that. So an actor, it's talking about essentially you're defining a resource that only lets one party in at once to work with it, and then they have to sort of release it before it becomes available for the next party to use. So that's what that is. And there's this main actor keyword you can put on a function. This. Yeah, so in the past, we had to use dispatch queue.main.async to essentially run any UI code or anything we wanted to run on the main thread. We had to use this block to run that code, essentially to give it to the main thread to run. So you know, you'd have to do something like this, and then put whatever code you wanted here, and essentially it passes it to the main thread to run whenever it's free to run it. Because you don't want to run any UI type code like refreshing the UI, updating the UI, or anything that causes the UI to update from a background thread, because the main thread is the person who's but you know what I mean, who's responsible for the UI. So now we don't have to do that. There is a way for you to specify that a function is always run on the main thread. It'll never be run in a background thread. So it automatically knows always to wait for the main thread to be ready to run that. So I think that's a cool improvement and saves us a ton of work. Okay, so before we jump into SwiftUI, I'm just checking the time. I might have to, I might have to stream this again tomorrow. You know, I do have a stream set up already for the same time tomorrow, and we'll probably go through the other half of this on stream tomorrow, because I didn't realize that time would fly by having so much fun. So I think we have time probably to go through the Swift section, the SwiftUI section, and then we'll have to call it a day, because I have to run, unfortunately. And then I'll also, you know, spend a few minutes on questions, and then we'll come again tomorrow if you're free, but I'll be here. So SwiftUI, I want to show you some of the cool stuff. They basically released a whole bunch of new modifiers that make it a lot easier to do some of the, I think I jumped too much, sorry. Right before him, he's talking about Swift Playgrounds. Okay. All right, so this is where we're at. So you guys know the SwiftUI list, right? That's this guy right here, and it's an easy way for you to show a list of items. So they've added a couple of new modifiers. One of them is called swipe actions, and it allows you easily to specify, you know, when you swipe a row for something to happen. So in this case, they have a button. When you swipe it, it favorites and it adds a heart there. So that's a cool thing. Another one is refreshable. This refreshable modifier essentially gives you pull to refresh just with a single modifier. So that's really cool. They also have this ability here to limit a specific modifier depending on the platform, maybe even the OS version. It should be OS version as well. So you can selectively only have these modifiers for specific platforms, and I think they needed to do this. Searchable is another modifier that instantly adds a search field at the top. So that's pretty cool. You still have to write the logic for how the search happens, right? But you don't have to build any of this UI yourself. You just add this searchable modifier to a list, and you instantly get a text field up there. And then as you can see here, you can also specify search suggestions. Let me see if I can, yeah. So there, these suggestions, essentially, they're listing these search suggestions based off of like a field on your view model. But again, you're gonna have to come up with these suggestions. As long as you have that data somewhere in a property or somewhere that can be accessed, you can specify them here. And just with a couple of lines of code, you can get sort of a filtering or search functionality there. So that's really cool for the list. There's also a bunch of accessibility modifiers now. So there is one which is called the accessibility rotor. And I'll be honest, I haven't really explored accessibility myself, but this is a huge thing. And I love the way Apple is going with being more inclusive, because my whole thing with CodeWithChris is being inclusive and being a very friendly environment to learn coding, and no judgments and no putting people down or anything like that. So I really feel positive about Apple being very inclusive, at least to the public. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but they always come up with these new features to make it so that everyone can code. So the accessibility rotor essentially helps you. It allows people to select different parts of your app. So it looks like this. I guess they don't have to actually be able to scroll or anything like that. It lists all the options like that, so you can maybe use voice to text to select something, or maybe you can whatever sort of selection device they're using. But this is definitely easier to navigate and select something than it is with a list like that. The other thing to help us implement accessibility better in our apps is this other modifier called accessibility representation. And this modifier allows you to inherit the full accessibility implementation of another control. So let's say you're building a custom stepper control. Well, if you're building like a custom stepper control from the ground up, you're going to have to make sure it's accessible. And you might not want to go through the effort of doing that. But this modifier allows you to essentially inherit all of the full accessibility implementation of the Apple stepper. So you don't have to do any additional work. The other thing that you might have seen here is this component right here. This is a new SwiftUI component called a table. I haven't played with it, but it apparently can do multi-column, and yeah, I think it's much needed. A lot of apps have this sort of data grid type view, and that was something that we were missing before. So new table component, very cool. And then the other thing is they're showing that they're showing this little thing where it'll be intelligent enough to recognize that you have a background here, and instead of gray subtext, it's going to make it look really cool like that, and just kind of show through the background. So they called it material support. I don't exactly know what that means until I dig in and play with it. But there's other new things that they didn't cover. There's a location button, which there was a WWDC session that I saw that I bookmarked, and essentially it's a button that someone can tap to give your app permission to geolocate them. So the traditional ways like pop up this little dialogue, and then people would have to opt in and say, okay, allow this app to track me. But with this location button, that makes things easier. Whole bunch of other stuff that they didn't really show, they just listed. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there. For the rest of this, we are going to do this tomorrow. But let's field some questions. You know what my greatest fear is in doing these streams is somehow my mic cuts out, something happens, and I'm talking for like half an hour, and everyone's like, we can't hear you, and I won't know, I'll just keep talking. So I really need that second screen. But now that they announced that cool thing where, what did they call it? Universal control, where you can put like an iPad right beside your device and it just becomes a second screen. So I think I'm definitely getting a new iPad just to play with the building apps on the iPad thing, and I want to show people that, so I'm getting a new iPad. Oh shoot, sound is low. I hope you guys were able to hear me over the music. Otherwise I would have just done the whole stream like that. Okay. Well, it looks like we're pretty good for questions. tutor. We have a ton of playlists on our channel. Just go to youtube.com/CodeWithChris and you'll see the beginner playlist. Sure. You know what? Ready Crafty, I'm going to try talking a little bit louder, or I'm going to try turning down. Let's see. I don't want to blow. If I talk too loud, it gets into the yellow section and it's going to hurt your ears. AN, I'm not really sure what you mean for 12.5, like iOS 12.5? No, Xcode 12.5 you're saying, right? What am I using? Am I using Xcode? Yeah, 12.5. But I don't know exactly if there were really big changes from 12.4 to 12.5. I think one of the things that I have to balance is seeing what they've changed, and then seeing if I have to change all the material. So as you can imagine, we have so many videos and lessons and courses and all of that. If they completely change the way things look and people can't follow, I have to redo everything. And sometimes that's a real nightmare. So if the changes aren't too big, what I usually do is just write a note, tell you, okay, this button's moved there. And hopefully that's enough. If you can't follow that, we always have a forum. There's always people you can ask. You know what? I am going to tell you guys about this in case you don't know. So we have a Code Crew community here. Again, inclusive. That's the whole thing with Code with Chris, right? No judgments. Everyone's there to learn. There are no dumb questions. And we try to help everyone, whether you are, a paying subscriber for our courses or not. We'll still point you in the right direction, even if it's not with our resources. So that is that. And this actually has become a huge part of Code with Chris. And before, some of you actually might be from our old Facebook community, and we still have that up and running actually. So what is it here? This one. We have a Facebook community that we had before, but I had sort of a scare. One day it just closed because it said that we had broken some rule on Facebook. But then after I sort of appealed it and said, what did we break in terms of rules and guidelines? And they reinstated us, and that was a wake-up call that you have to, as much as possible, own the platforms that you really care about. Otherwise, it can just be taken away from you. And so we started our own forum, which is hosted on our own hosted servers. And nobody can take this away, because it's not only for me, it's for the people who use the community too, right? Imagine something that you've been relying on, that you've been making friends on, that you've been learning on, and suddenly just vanishes. And I think that would be horrible. So this is sort of just still developing. In the future, I definitely want to run more community app challenges, because right now, we're the one issuing the community app challenges. Like the stock tracker app is one current one that we've got going, where we challenge you guys to build something like this. And by the way, that ends in 7 days. You should still have time to do that. And then we're going to do a showcase video of all the apps that have been submitted. So we have been getting more submissions thanks to extending the deadlines. That's really awesome. But I went off on a tangent. In the future, I want you guys to create the app challenges. So I want you guys to issue your own app challenges to the community. And that way, I think it opens up a lot more variety and also a lot more fun. There's just going to be, anyone can issue a community app challenge. I think that would be really cool. That's where I want to get to with that. Okay, cool. Let's see if we have more questions before I have to hop off in a couple of minutes. The stock app is too hard. Yeah, you know what? It is a little harder than the weather app, and we had a lot more participation on the weather app. But this is what I'm trying to gauge, right? Because the weather app was the first one, stock tracker app is the second one. It's really hard to nail the right difficulty, and so I need that feedback from you guys. If it's too difficult, you know what, for the next one, we'll try to have it like an easy level, medium level, and whatnot, but still tuning. Awesome. I'm glad you found that, tutor. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you for watching. Pegasi. We were talking yesterday on the WWD stream. I didn't realize that I was talking to you. I didn't see your last name, or I didn't make that connection. Maybe because I was just so nervous from streaming for the first time, but I wasn't even talking. Awesome. So glad to see you. All right. Well, time is getting to the end, so thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate the support. I'm going to be trying to stream every single day this week at the same time. Tomorrow we'll be going through the rest of this list right here. If I have nothing to talk about on Thursday and Friday, then I'll just turn off the mic and I'm gonna spend it coding. You can code too. You can study. You know what? I have a lot of sessions to watch, so that's what I'll probably be doing if we have nothing to talk about. But otherwise, maybe it could be like a hangout chat or anything like that. But I just want to get used to being in front of a live camera. It's very different from recording myself for a lesson where I can do as many takes as I want and then pick the best take. But at the same time, I feel like live streaming like this and having a live camera, I'm more easily able to show you guys, I guess be more myself, because that doesn't really come through on edited videos. So I look forward to doing more live streams. Hopefully I get to the point where I'm doing presentations and teaching more. That I do intend to do that. And also member Q&As, or Q&As for the public, as well as Q&As for our CWC Plus members as well. So anyways, thank you guys all for joining. I'm going to end the stream now, and I'll see you guys tomorrow if you are free. All right, bye.